Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar today. This webinar is part of our Unpacking Coaching webinar series that the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations puts on. Today, I'm really excited with the people we have on the webinar who are going to be doing most of the presentation. They're Denise Binder and Sally Hansen, and I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves.
Cool. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Denise Binder. I am at the University of South Florida in Tampa. I provide technical assistance on the new Center for PMI. I've been a program coach for a long time now. So I've coached a lot of coaches recently. So this whole notion of creating action plans that are functional, that are meaningful for you and your coachee is a topic that's been coming up a lot. So I'm excited to get to dive into this with you and hopefully answer some of your questions and making this whole idea of action planning not feel as scary as it might currently.
And I'm Sally Hansen. I'm here from Minnesota. My role is to be an external coach. I work for the Minnesota Centers of Excellence for Young Children with Disabilities, and I am currently supporting 6 programs in our state in implementing the pyramid model practices. And that means I get to help their implementation teams, but more importantly, I get to support their internal coaches. We do a lot of co-coaching in the beginning to build their capacity. So I have some great examples of when we've written action plans together, some that went really well and some that we learned from, which is part of the learning curve. Mm-hmm. Been using practice-based coaching since 2014 really formally here in Minnesota in a really systematic way, and we were very grateful to have the support of the National Technical Assistance folks then, and so hopefully you'll hear some things today that will make your implementation of coaching just a little bit easier too.
Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and we have a little bit of content that we want to share before we start opening it up for questions. So today what we really wanted to go through is the whole idea of action planning, what it encompasses, what good action plan goals should look like, how do you choose the right goal for the right teacher, the components we think that create an effective action plan. So we'll talk through some of those. And then when we're done, ML is going to do some kind of interview questions with Sally and I, and we'll hopefully get to answer some of your questions before we end today. So the idea of choosing a goal. So we're going into a brand new teacher classroom usually where we don't have much experience with the program or with the system. And so how do you come up with this very abstract goal? And it's something that we don't want to go into lightly because we really feel like this action plan is the thing that's going to drive your time with the teacher. We want to set a goal that is meaningful to both the practitioner and the children and the families that she's supporting. So there's a lot of weight resting on this idea of the goal that we start off with. So when we think about setting that first or those initial goals, we always want to make sure that that process is collaborative so that the teacher has ownership of the goals that you're choosing as well as the coach. So as a coach, I may guide goal setting a little bit, but I really want to hear the teacher's perspective. What do they feel is a skill that they want to work on? And we'll write a goal based on that. with a little guidance from me. So when we think of that big, broad goal statement, we want to make sure that the goals are really well written so that they're specific enough that the teacher knows exactly what she's supposed to be working on. They're observable so that anybody that walks in and out of the room knows what we're working on. They can see it happening at multiple points in time. We also need to make sure that the goals are measurable. So there's some certain outcome that we want to get to, and we're able to monitor and make sure that we're getting closer to that outcome with the goal that we're written. And the last part is that it's a goal that feels achievable for both the practitioner, the teacher, and for the coach within a short amount of time. So it's not something that's going to take us a whole school year to achieve. It's something that we can maybe get a new resource, build a new visual, and we can make changes happen pretty rapidly. When you think about goals, Sally, is there something else that you take into consideration when you're writing that goal or when you're choosing that first goal?
Yeah, these are the guidelines that we also follow. And I would say there's a couple of sort of tricks that we've learned along the way. One of them is that sometimes we talk about our M not only being measurable, but meaningful, because we really want the teacher, the person who's doing it, to be excited. So one of the questions we'll often ask in setting a goal is, our teachers go through training, tier 1 training, and then we do some coaching, and then tier 2. So after each of those and starting our sessions, we'll say, what did you get excited about at training? Did you talk to anyone who had a great idea? Did you see a video? We pause long enough, they'll usually find something that is exciting or meaningful. So I would say, couldn't agree more, that having that collaborative process is helpful. We always go in as coaches with a Post-it in our pocket with a backup goal, because sometimes you say, so what do you want to work on? Or what are you thinking about? If it's too open-ended of a question, I've gotten the blank stare before, like, why don't you tell me you're the coach? Be a little more clear in my question. What are you excited about? What could we do different for a specific child or routine? But also having a backup goal that feels really like a quick win. I think that's the other part I was going to say, is the achievable.
Mm-hmm.
We really encourage teachers to pick something that we can do, celebrate, and then build on our success. I had an example of a teacher who really got excited about family engagement, which is awesome. But the goal she wanted to write was that she was going to go from the situation they were in, which is very minimal family engagement outside of, a few families participating in conferences, to every family will attend 3 family engagement events. And our achievable question was, well, what will it be like if we fall short of that goal? And she said, well, I would just be happy if they did one thing. And I thought, well, there's our goal. Let's, offer multiple opportunities, but shoot for one goal. So those are kind of the things that we've tried with goals.
That's, I love the idea of changing the M or adding to the M so that it's meaningful.
Yeah.
That's really a great way to make sure that your practitioner is bought into the goal setting process, and not just go opening with, what do you want to work on? But
that doesn't work.
No. I want to work on getting margaritas at the beach. That's what I want to work on. No, so if you anchor it to that training, that's really, really helpful. And if we can get into setting goals as soon as they, quickly after they've gone to training, even better. So that leads us right into how are we identifying goals? And so we do definitely want to have reflective discussions with the teacher. I think that's super important, and it should be where we always try to anchor in those, at least those first couple of goals for sure. We want to think about the training that they've received. If they've not gone into all 3 modules, but maybe just tier 1, like you said, you guys do in Minnesota, what can we branch off from the relationships or the environments modules that we can really start working on right away? You want to think about the program itself. Does the administration or the hopefully program-wide leadership team have priorities for their program? So there might be things that their benchmarks, their program-wide benchmarks of quality has hammered in that they really need to work on. So as a coach, you want to take into those considerations as well. What's important for the program as a whole? You want to think about the kids that they're supporting and the families that they're supporting in that center. And how can we write goals that will affect all the different family dynamics that are incorporated in the program? So taking in, that's a lot of parts. It's a lot of things to think about, but I think we can do it in a way that if we're back and forthing, if we've built that strong, durable, collaborative relationship with our practitioner, that we can take all those things into consideration and prioritize some good goals for our teachers. So as a coach, the thing that I'm looking at when I go into classrooms is my teapot, or the teaching pyramid observation tool. So I'm going to always try to do a baseline or a teapot before we go into coaching. Sometimes that happens way before the coaching, and that's ideal. Sometimes it happens simultaneous to the coaching. It just depends on your schedule and the teacher's schedule. But you really want to have some kind of assessment, some kind of concrete information about what the teacher's current strengths are and where the areas that they need support. And so once I have my teapot in hand, this really makes my goal setting so much easier and so much more comprehensive, because I know exactly from a systematic standpoint what the teacher really needs support around. So that collaboration, those program discussions, those reflective conversations, considering the support that individual kids may need or that families may need, is going to really help you create goals that are meaningful for teachers and relevant to their outcomes. So we always want to set goals that are important, but that are going to get them closer to those long-term, those durable changes that they want to see for kids and for families.
I think that's really important, that knowing the teapot as a coach is really important. The better we know it, I have found the easier it is for me to help the coachees set goals, because you know exactly what the practices are that they're working towards. It's also been helpful in showing the teapot data, the graph, to the coachee to say, let's take a look. What do you think about this? Is this does this resonate for you? Is there any surprises in here? And one question we ask a lot is, as a learner, are you the kind of person who likes to pick something you're close and get there quickly? Or do you like to start on something that there's lots of things to work towards? Or is there a different approach? And really respecting that each coachee is going to have a different style. Just because I would rather move that one teapot item from halfway to all the way doesn't mean someone else might not start with, I am not doing this at all. and then start. So we try to be respectful of different learning styles.
That's awesome. And ML and I were having almost this exact conversation this morning. So some of our newbie coaches on a different grant are thinking that, well, if we're adding too much teapot indicators, aren't we kind of teaching to the test, and it doesn't feel as authentic? It feels very scripted. And in no way, shape, or form do we want to feel like teapot is a test. We have built teapot because these practices, these indicators are just best practice. And these are the things that are going to help you achieve those long-term outcomes that we want to see for all our kids. So knowing the teapot and understanding the use of the teapot, and that it's just not another data set that we have to collect and turn into somebody, but understanding the functionality of it and how, if we are doing these specific components, then we really are maximizing our engagement time, our social emotional learning time with all kinds of different learners in our classroom.
One thing we've told people, I don't know if this will resonate for you, is that the teapot gives us the science for teaching. What are the things that we know really make a difference for kids and families? But you still get to bring the art. You're the teacher, you're the artist. You make it look like your style. So if you want to put up board maker emoji, feeling faces, great. If you want to take feeling pictures of the kids, great. If you want to use inside out characters or emoji, great. And we've seen those different expressions of the practices. That's where the teacher really gets to put her own flair on things.
I love that. I'm going to go in and out personally, but that's just me. So when we are setting our goals, some things that you want to consider when you've written that goal. Does the goal include one or more specific actions? So you want to have very specific action steps for your teacher so they know what they're supposed to do, when they're supposed to do it, with what, with whom. So these things should be outlined in your action plan. You also want to make sure that the actions that we've outlined for the teacher can be measured or counted. So we make sure that we gave a transition warning 5 minutes before 3 of our 5 transitions. So we can count that. We know exactly when she's supposed to do it and how many times she's supposed to do it. So you want to make sure that the goals that you're writing can include those components. Times of days, specific activities or routines that you want the teacher to be implementing this new skill. Those are great components to consider. And then also that achievement statement, making sure it's something that can happen or that can get done within 2 to 3 coaching cycles, that it's not something that is going to take us 180 school days to get through, that we're going to be able to see change, to see action. If we can start to see that needle moving, that's when you get the buy-in. That's when you get the hook. Their life becomes easier. Kids are becoming more engaged and are learning more skills. That's when you get the hook. That's when you get the buy-in.
So I have a question. I'm just going to interject here because it's relevant, I think, to what y'all are talking about. So, you know, Denise, what you just said about buy-in, I'm wondering what you do when what you think are good goals are not the same as what the teacher identifies as potential goals that he or she wants to work on, how you navigate that.
Mm-hmm. It happens all the time, and I don't want to push my opinions on teachers. I just don't ever try to do that. But I may take it back to some of our research around why I'm picking the goal and why she's picking the goal. So we may talk about the teapot data or other forms of data that we may have collected, like class or like Eckers or Gold, whatever it is that she's using. I want to bring those kinds of things to the conversation. And for me, always bringing it around to those child outcomes. So, okay, having this goal is going to affect these kids in this way. What do you think about this goal? Is that going to still get you to that same kid outcomes? So for me, always wrapping it around kid outcomes is usually the path I take, the guiding towards different goals. You have other ideas, Sally?
Yeah, I would agree with what you said. I think that I don't think we ever try to tell a teacher what they should work on. And in fact, if we try to do some coaching around, you've got a 35-minute circle time every day, and one of the things we know is that best practice would be less than 20 minutes. How do you feel about maybe working on ideas to shorten? If she says absolutely not, we might say, are there any kids who are struggling with circle so that we can bring it back to that? If we're really getting pushback, we might say in a concession, well, let's table it for now and see if it feels more, like something we can tackle later on. But I'm just going to tell you that I'm here for you if you decide that, man, it really is hard for those 3 or 4 kiddos and we need to make a change. You can change your mind and we can go back to it.
Yeah, I think that conversation, that back and forth thing is the important component there, to just keep the conversation going. So it just doesn't end up like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that, and then we're done.
Right.
We don't ever talk about it again. If it's something I feel is going to have a positive influence on the children.
Another thing I wanted to share about goals is that when I started writing goals in coaching and with my newer internal coaches, sometimes it feels a little stressful to come up with a good goal in a coaching session with your coachee when you're kind of new to it. So we've asked our coachees, would it be okay if we take this back and kind of finesse it a little and make sure it meets all these checkpoints, and then either email it to you, or we're using a lot of Google Drive shared folders for goals and action plans. And then you can tell us if this met what you meant, and we'll make sure that it hits all these things, just to take the pressure off of having to be so precise while you're trying to also be collaborative and really
It's seriously like you're juggling like 13 balls in the moment. So yeah, I think that's a really great idea. And I do something similar. So I might sketch out ideas on paper and pencil while I'm in the moment in the debrief with the teacher, and then kind of take it back and make sure that I've really written a goal that's specific, that can be measured. And so I might take it back and finesse it on my own, and then email the teacher and make sure she's on board with what the changes that I made. Cool. So this kind of talks about what we were just talking about, and really, if you're at a loss, if you don't know and the teacher doesn't have any ideas, or the ideas that the teacher has are kind of off point, everybody wants to start with Tucker Turtle. And Tucker Turtle is awesome. We love Tucker Turtle, but if you don't have if you don't have universal practices, you're really not going to see a lot of moving the needle just by implementing Tucker Turtle. So always going back to that conversation. Okay, let's talk about that, and doing lots of reflective questioning and answers. If you get teachers who are kind of not pushing back, but, oh, I do that, or I've tried that in the past and it just doesn't work, then kind of thinking about, well, is what we're doing right now affecting all the kids the way that, engaging all the kids that you, in the way that you would want to? If the response is no, then let's just tweak. Or I think what you're doing is on point. Is there ways that we can enhance it or strengthen the practice, make it happen more often so that we are affecting all the learners all the time? So that conversation is really going to be key. So some questions that you might think about trying, and I think doing it more often is kind of my go-to. Yeah, I saw you do that last Monday, and it worked really, really well. Do you think maybe doing it more often or repeating it so that kids, even those learners who need more practice, are being affected by that strategy or that drill? So that's kind of my go-to when I think about reflections. Do you have a go-to, Sally?
Yeah, I like I like wondering, I wonder what it's like for a particular kid in your class. Especially if it's, well, I went over the visual schedule in the beginning of the school year and I don't need to do that anymore. And I'll say, yeah, it seems like some kids don't need that. I'm just wondering about Johnny, and tell me what you think about how he's experiencing the routine. That can be helpful, and always back to kids. So I don't think we can bring up specific kids or kids in general or routines about kids enough to remind folks why we're doing this.
Yeah. Awesome. So when you feel like maybe your teacher isn't 100% bought into the process yet, so they're unsure of what your time together is supposed to look like, what they're going to get out of this. This is something that Sally is doing in Minnesota, and you can kind of tell us about how this works for you guys.
Yeah, so we've just really found over our years of working with programs that the more respectful we can be of our professionals and the more choice we offer folks right off the bat, it does really make a difference for buy-in. And so if you're working in a program where the implementation team or the administrators or whomever is making decisions about who's going to be coached when, you might want to consider offering folks some choice about that. We don't tell people, do you want to be coached or not? It's really more of a when in your life is going to be better. If you're sending, your baby to kindergarten this fall, maybe you want to wait until you've managed that a little bit, or maybe you're really excited because you went to this training, you heard something about it and you want to go first, but maybe the administrators were thinking someone else because they're more veterans. So it just seems like the more we set the stage for what coaching is about and we offer folks that respectful opportunity to say, I'm ready to tackle my own practice. Because it is a lot of reflection and thinking about what can I do different to support kids, or what can I do more to support kids, and folks need to be in the right frame of mind for that. So this is an example of just a Google survey that we have created in Minnesota, and teams optionally can use this, but have found it is really helpful when folks say, hey, pick me. And then when I get the opportunity to be coached, this like great investment in me as a professional, here's what I'm excited to work on. That's how we've sort of set the stage for, this is a great opportunity for you as a professional.
Love it. That seems like it would help that buy-in so much, that you had ownership. I got to say when I wanted to start and what I wanted to start on before all these people started coming in my room.
Yeah, and we have a program who kind of treats it like you win the lottery. Like everybody fills out the form and then they have a big staff meeting, and every year they announce who's been chosen from the pool of people who said, I'd like a turn now. Everybody claps for them, and it's really fun. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it just generates this excitement. So we feel really proud when folks are able to do it that way.
So I was just thinking when y'all were talking about how important it is to create a culture of coaching within our programs and create a culture where coaching is a good thing to do. And I think that, or is a good thing to get, right? And I think there are enough kind of things going on around coaching these days where coaching is sometimes seen as punitive, like the people who need it most are getting it, versus that it's something you want, that every good athlete has a coach and every good teacher has a coach. And so I love what y'all are talking about, especially this forum, Sally, in terms of building that culture where coaching is something that people want, that people choose to do versus something that happens to them.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We've seen a huge success when we try to give or try to coach people who are not doing what they're supposed to. It just doesn't work. We just fallen flat time and time again. But when you shift your frame to my program or my county or my administrators care about me enough as a professional to invest time and money and resources in me to get better, that's a whole different feeling.
Mm-hmm. And like y'all were saying earlier, the whole bringing it back to the children thing, if we can bring it back to the what's going to help our children be ready for kindergarten, or what's going to help our kids, whatever, that again, that takes the focus off something that off us as adults and really grounds it in what we need to do for children. So that's great.
Awesome. Love it.
Thanks. Sorry, Denise, if I got you off track.
No. So the other thing I wanted us to think about is how we can help build goals that help teachers learn a new skill and then feel comfortable trying it out. I think some of our teachers hear good things, but we're so rooted in what we always do. This is how I do it. This is the song I always sing in the morning. This is the visual I always use for circle time. So opening up to new ideas and then giving them the permission to try it out and being there to support them as they try this new thing. Change is hard. Change is hard for everybody. It's hard for our kids. It's hard for our practitioners as well. So setting goals that may help them learn a new skill, and then when specifically they get to try it out. Maybe it's a little tiny period of time. Once a week at the beginning of circle, I'm going to just try this new thing. So this example is that they're going to learn how to make a visual schedule. So maybe their visual schedule is the same schedule they've had posted for 15 years. And I've had that happen. So learn how to make a schedule that's interactive, that's engaging, that's specific to the needs of the children that you're supporting. And then I'm going to help the kids use the schedule to complete activities. So it's this goal right here. Do we think it's specific? Do we think it's observable? Do we think it's measurable and achievable? So we got to keep those questions in our head the whole time when we're writing these goals. Another thing you want to maybe think about is, so I saw you use the visual schedule in September, but now it's December and kids are not transitioning very well. They're not engaged with the routines as well. So we want to think about how can we do this more often. So this goal asks teachers to use a visual schedule to remind kids of daily activities. They're going to use it during morning circle, before centers, after lunch, and before we go outside. So they're not just going to do it at the beginning of the day, but they're going to do it multiple times, do it more often throughout the day to help tighten up those other transitions. And then always thinking, is it specific? Is it observable? Is it measurable and achievable? And then there might be goals that teachers are doing the skill kind of in a that affects some of the kids, but it's really not affecting all those learners. Maybe those targeted kids, those top of the pyramid kids are not being affected. So we want to do that skill more efficiently. So this one asks the teacher to review the daily schedule at the beginning of the day, briefly review the schedule periodically to show kids what we're about to do next, so children know what to expect. So this one is going to be doing it with more efficiency and more consistently. And then always remembering our questions. And then there may be a skill that is just not working. So it's a skill that's important to teach. It's a practice that we want the teacher to use throughout the day, but maybe we just need to do it a little bit differently. We need to add a different visual. We need to add a different way that we're explaining it, or a different way that we're teaching that skill. So this one asks that the visual schedule can be changed as needed, so that pictures can be removed or turned over when items are finished. So thinking next of the different components that we want to make sure that your action plans achieve. So the goal writing is that big, broad area, that skill that we want to build on, that we want to do more often, that we want to do better. The action plan moves us from that broad goal to those places where we can actually apply it, we can actually achieve it in the classroom. And the action plan is the part that we're monitoring through our coaching process, those little action steps that are getting us closer to that big, broad goal. So the action plan is this kind of driver. This is what we set out in the middle of the table during each of our debriefing meetings. You want to make sure that you have an updated action plan to start every debrief. The action plan will include the goal, so that's our big focus. And then those little planned action steps, and those can change every coaching cycle or every coaching meeting, depending on how the kids responded or didn't respond to a specific step. And then we want to have an achievement statement. How will we know if this goal has been achieved when these specific things happen? So the goal statement, remember, that's that big, broad statement. We want it to be specific. We want it to be observable. We want it to be measurable. We want to make sure that that goal is achievable and that we've written action steps, or I'll always say the baby steps that are going to get us closer to that big goal. It should include any resources or materials that you need to make that happen. So if you needed new pictures for your visual schedule, if you needed Velcro or a way to hang the new pictures on the whiteboard, if you needed magnets, whatever you need to make that happen, you want to list it on the action plan very specifically. And then some time frame when those resources are going to be supplied and when it's going to get done. So this is the format or the form that we've adopted and we use on NCPMI, and it is on the new NCPMI website, so you can download it at any point if you like it and you want to use it. But for me, what I do during debriefing is I'll bring this blank form and I'll put it in the middle of the table, and we'll start talking about practices either based on my teapot data or based on the teacher's training experience. What is the practice that they want to do better? And then we'll kind of sketch it out in pencil. What resources do we need to make that happen? Like any pictures or books or songs or puppets, whatever they need, we're gonna write that down on the form. And then the time frame. When do you want to start doing it? Do you want to do it next Wednesday at circle time, at the front of circle time. And then again, before we go to centers, specifically when you are going to use that new teaching practice. And then lastly, our achievement statement. What do you want to get out of this new practice? What's the measure that you know it's been achieved? Is this similar to the form that you guys use, Sally?
It is. We actually offer during our training for new coaches 4 different formats for the coach and the coachee to agree on together. And they all have the same components. So you need to have the same, goal and the steps and the resources and the time frame. But it is another small way that we try to offer a coachee some flexibility to meet their learning style. Some coaches are very linear and they like an action plan with, a box for step 1 and a box for step 2 and a box for step 3. And others are a little more, big picture flower thinkers. And so we've just really found, again, the more choice we give folks, the more we respect their learning style. As coaches, we talk all the time about it's not really about us. We're just sort of facilitating this and supporting you in your professional development. So you tell me how you like to write it.
Good. So again, this form, a copy of the blank form is on the NCPMI website under the coaching resources if you're interested in taking a look at it. So everybody knows the teapot, which, I am the teapot queen. I love the teapot. The teapot makes my coaching job so easy. I don't know how else I can make it happen without this data in front of me. So I would take my baseline teapot data. I want to look at it before I go into debriefing. I want to see what areas the teacher is really strong. I want to look at areas where I want to strengthen practices. And then I always think about those universal, those kind of tier 1 practices that might be lower. So if we're looking at the example on the screen, having schedules and routines score at a 20%, for me, that's as a coach, that's something that I want to strengthen that score as much as I can, as soon as I can, because I know I'm going to get a lot of bang for my buck if I can make that happen. So looking at this particular teapot in front of me, I'm going to set a goal around schedules and routines. So I'm going to go into my debrief, not with anything written in blood, but I'm going to have that sticky note in my pocket about the goal that I think would give us the most value for our time. So this, based on the teapot that we just saw, this might be a goal that I would write to reintroduce circle time rules at the beginning of every circle or large group time, teach the rules with a visual, and then positively reinforce those rules. So that might be a possible goal statement that I might write. And again, I'm going to always ask myself, once I write the goal, is that specific? Does it tell the teacher when she's going to do it, with how she's going to do it? Is it measurable? So at the beginning of every circle, I can watch to see if that's happening, so I know it's when it's happening. And then, is it achievable? Is it something that I think the teacher can manage doing within the next month or 2 months? And then asking myself, is it helping us, the teacher and I, is to learn a new skill and to try a new skill? Is it helping her to do it more often, or to do it more effectively, or to do it in a different manner with a different resource or a different period of time? So once I set the goal, I'm going to make sure that the teacher's on board. It's something that she feels like she can do and that will help alleviate some of the stress of large group time, help engage more of her friends during those times, and then I'm going to make sure that it answers those questions for us. And so once I have that broad goal, then I need to create some action steps, or we need to create some action steps. And this is really where you want the teacher to voice what is going to work for her, what does her teaching style lend to. So if you have a teacher like you were just talking about, that I need step 1 and I need to know exactly what I'm doing, step 2, and this is it. So you have a very linear teacher. The steps can be as small as they need them to be. It can be, I pull out my picture cards, I hang them on the wall at the front of the class, so every day. The steps can be as small as they need, that makes sense for them. We want to know who's in charge of completing each of those steps, or finding a specific resource. When is the each action step going to be completed? And then we revisit that and revise it as often as we need to. So maybe we picked a visual, we picked board maker, and our kids don't get it. They just don't understand the pictures. They're too abstract. They're not meaningful at all. So we need to ditch the board maker pictures and maybe go back to taking pictures of the kids themselves doing those activities. So you can revise and revisit those goals, and you should regularly. So when you're thinking about action steps, think about, are there action steps that need to be broken down in different parts? How is that particular action step getting you closer to that big goal? Is there an action step that you wrote that might need more support from the coach than another? Maybe the teacher would like to see you model it first. Maybe they need some like little cues in the beginning, side by side, or verbal support, or maybe a gestural support when they start trying this new skill. Videotaping can be really powerful if the teacher's on board with that. Is there another visual, another resource, another material that could be used to get you closer to that action step? And is there always a timeline for when the next action step is supposed to be achieved?
One question we ask to ensure that we're really a partnership, especially if there's any hesitancy, we usually ask, what's one thing you want to do to make this happen, and what's one thing that I can do as your coach to help make this happen, so that we really both have a piece in the work.
I always, on my action, when we list out our action steps, I'll write our names by it. So like, this is one that Denise is going to do. I'm going to get the Velcro tape. The teacher is going to take pictures. So I always write our names on there, so we take ownership of those different steps.
So I kind of have a question related to this, so I'm going to kind of insert it here, which is, how then does the things y'all were just talking about, impact what you do during the observation that follows?
So those action steps will be the things that you're looking for during your observation. So that's why in the PBC cycle, we call it focused, because we're really looking for those little baby steps. Did they happen when they were supposed to happen, as many times as they were supposed to happen, with the visuals, the teaching strategies that we said they were going to happen with? So that really, once we outline those action steps, then I know when I'm coming in for my observation, I know what I'm looking for, when I'm looking for it to happen, with what kinds of materials it should be happening with.
Yeah, to build on that, oh, sorry, Mary Louise, we actually ask, we have our coaches and we ask our coachees, what do you want me to look for and what data do you want me to take?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really fascinating when you start asking the coachee, if she said, you know, I want to give, you know, the warnings before transitions, and then you say, okay, well, I can write down what you said, or I can do that. Is there something you want me to look for? What do you want me to take data on? Yeah, she says, well, can you tally how many kids do it on the first prompt and how many do it on the second prompt? And, you know, or she says, I'm trying to give specific positive praise or feedback to kids. Great, so what do you want me to look for? How do you want me to tally that? Some teachers will say, write down exactly what I say. Some will say, can you take my class list and tally how many times I engage with each student? Can you tally how many times it's boys versus girls? Teachers are fascinating when you ask them what to look for. It's really fun.
So it kind of strikes me when y'all are talking that that two things. One is that that the action plan kind of helps create a safe space in coaching. So I think people are so used to people coming and observing in their classrooms and not knowing what they're observing, and that the action plan really takes that unknown out of it. And the other thing, Sally, as you were talking, that I was thinking about is that it also, when you ask those questions like, what do you want me to look for? Both it links the action plan and the how will I know if I'm doing it pieces together. But also maybe it serves in the future for helping people be more reflective, so that if people can think about, I want to give transition warnings, and then the data they want to collect, then it helps them connect. The reason I want to do transition warnings is to see children transition independently. You know, it gets them thinking about how what they're doing impacts what happens with kids. So,
Totally.
Yeah. Okay, Denise, sorry I derailed you one more time.
That's all good. So then the last part is our achievement statement. So how will the team, so the coach and the coachee, how do they know when the goal has been met? So we want the achievement statement to focus on the adult behaviors. So what is the teacher going to do? How many times is she going to do it? Is she going to do it at certain points of the day for a specific number of days? So we want to make sure that we're not focusing on what the kids are going to do when we talk about is the goal achieved or not, but what we can do, so what we can control. And then again, we revisit that statement as many times as we need to. It always looks awesome when we put it on paper the first time, and then you try it out with a bunch of 3-year-olds and not so much. So always going back to it, revising it. And I say that that action plan, that form that we showed earlier is the thing that drives our meeting seriously. So I'll pull it out and then we'll talk through goal, action step by action step. Did I see it happen? Did I not see it happen? Why did it happen? How were the kids affected when it did happen or didn't happen? And then we talk about the achievement statement. Did she feel like she met all points of it or not? So when you're considering writing an achievement statement, you want to make sure that it's clear to both the coach and the coachee. They'll know that it's met when these very specific things happen, and that the statement is dependent about kids or teachers' actions, not kids. So thinking about our circle time goal that we wrote, here's what my action plan will look like when it's all typed out and pretty. So remember the goal was that we were going to reintroduce circle time rules. We were going to teach those rules with visuals and then positively reinforce those rules. So our action steps were, and I bullet them, I didn't number them. But first we were going to make a poster and post the rules at the front of the circle that matches the rules children have posted on their spots. So we were going to include visual representations on the big poster. We were going to teach those rules at the beginning of every circle time. We were going to teach through examples and non-examples with the puppets. We were going to move into some role plays and some discussions with the kids to make sure that information became fluent. And then the teacher and her aide were going to try to give positive feedback to kids who are following the rules during the circle time routine or during the large group routine. The materials that we needed were the posters and the visuals. That was our timeline. We were supposed to get that poster done by the week of the 11th of February. And then our goal statement was when teachers are minimally redirecting kids to follow circle time rules. In addition, all adults are positively reinforcing rules more often than correcting. And then if we felt like it was complete, we can put our completed date at the end.
And then in Minnesota, you would take markers and stickers and you decorate it and then you hang it up in your hubby.
I love that.
That's cool. So that was kind of the end of our talk. Mary Louise, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Okay, so as y'all noticed, I kind of embedded questions throughout and we're actually out of time. So I'm just going to do a little bit of wrap up. First of all, I want to say, Denise and Sally, that was fabulous. And thank y'all so much for leading this discussion. I wanted to let you know that our next webinar is going to be in June, and we're going to be talking about reflection and feedback. So we'll be able to connect that to the whole action planning process that Denise and Sally talked about today. So just a couple of other things before we before we shut down the webinar. One is that we're going to have some resources on our website that you can get after we finish this call. One is a checklist, how you can kind of evaluate the quality of an action plan using a checklist. So that's going to be available on our website. And then also we wanted to let you know that the National Center for Early Childhood Development Teaching and Learning, which is a Head Start Child Care Center, is doing a webinar on action planning on March 27th. And we'll have the link on our website that you can paste into your browser to register for it if you want to do that. And also, after the webinar is held, we'll put a link on our website to where you can listen to a recording of it. Generally, we just want to invite you to visit our website to find out more about upcoming webinars. In addition to the Coaching Corner webinars or the our Unpacking Coaching webinars, we have other kind of webinars and materials, so we want to invite you to that. And then once again, we just want to remind you that we really want your feedback. So we hope you'll do the webinar evaluation that we're going to send out to you, and just remember that on that there will be a link where you can get a certificate for attending the webinar. And with that, we're going to be done for today. Thank you guys all for joining us and for your continued support of our work. And we'll look forward to seeing you on future webinars.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks, Sally. And
Thanks, Sally.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.